The storm came down off the mountain like something with a grudge, and Mira Aldwin knew that anything left in the open that night would be dead by morning. She was not supposed to be out in it. No sane woman was. But the goats had broken the back fence, and a healer who lost her goats lost her milk and her cheese and half her trade, so out she went into the white and the wind, her lantern guttering, her grandmother's old wool cloak pulled tight to her chin. That was how she found him, a shape in the snow where no shape should be. A man, face down, one arm flung out as if he had been reaching for something just past the edge of the world. There was blood under him, dark and steaming, freezing even as it spread. He was the biggest man she had ever seen, and he was dying, and every grain of sense she owned told her to turn around. A stranger, in the deep of the Greywood, bleeding from a wound no honest traveler carried. She could be dragging a murderer home by the collar. She could be dragging home her own death. She knelt down anyway. She always did. That was the whole trouble with her. What Mira did not know, as she got her shoulder under his arm and began to haul a man twice her weight through a blizzard toward her little stone cottage, was that she had just pulled the most hunted man in the north out of his own grave. She did not know the wound in his side had been put there by Silver, on purpose, by a hand he had trusted with his life. And she did not know, could not have known, that the half-frozen stranger whose heartbeat she could barely find was a king, and that the woman pulling him through the snow would one day be the ruin of the man who killed him. She only knew he was still breathing. For Mira, that had always been enough. Chapter 1. Getting him through the door nearly finished them both. He was dead weight and pride and bone, and the snow had turned to a skin of ice on the path, and twice Mira went down hard and lay there a moment with the wind screaming over her, thinking, "This is how it ends." The fool healer who could not let one stranger die in peace. Then she got up. She got up because her grandmother's voice was in her head the way it had been in her head every hard day for 2 winters now, since the old woman had been put in the cold ground at the forest's edge. "You do not measure a life before you save it," Ida used to say. "You save it, and you ask your questions after." So she asked her questions after. She got him over the threshold and onto the wide hearth pallet she kept for travelers, dragged the door shut against the storm, and dropped the bar across it. Then she stood with her back to that door, dripping and gasping, and looked at what she had brought into her house. He was younger than she had thought, somewhere past 30, with black hair frozen to his brow and a hard, unhandsome handsomeness to his face, all blunt bones and a jaw that looked like it had never once been told no. His clothes were good. That was the first wrong thing. The wool was fine and close woven. The boots were stitched by a craftsman, but there was no crest on him anywhere, no ring, no seal, nothing to say who he was, as if someone had stripped him of his name before they sent him into the snow to die. The second wrong thing was the wound. She cut his shirt away with her shears, and there it was, low on the left side, just under the ribs, a puncture, clean and deep, the kind a crossbow bolt leaves. The bolt itself was gone, snapped or pulled, but the flesh around it had gone a color she did not like at all, a gray-blue blackening that spidered out from the hole like frost climbing a window. Mira had treated cuts and breaks and births and fevers, and a man once who had taken an axe to his own foot trying to be clever. She had never seen a wound do that. She leaned close and breathed in, and under the iron smell of blood there was something cold and metal and bitter, something that made her back teeth ache. She did not have a word for it yet. But her hands had already started moving, because that was what her hands did. She built the fire higher. She got the ice out of his hair and the wet clothes off him and dry wool over him and hot stones wrapped in cloth packed along his sides. Because a man frozen near to death has to be warmed slowly, from the core, the way you coax a fire and do not just throw it on the flames. She got broth into the kettle. She pressed 2 fingers to the great vein in his throat and counted, and the count was slow and far away, like a drum heard across a valley, but it was there. And then she did the thing she would think about for a long time afterward. She got her grandmother's book. It lived in the cedar chest under the window, wrapped in oilcloth, and Mira almost never opened it, because opening it meant Ida's handwriting, and Ida's little notes in the margins, and the ache of missing her would rise up and take Mira's breath. But the wound was wrong, and Mira did not know what was wrong with it, and her grandmother had known more about wounds than any village physician. So she unwrapped the book, and she sat by the fire, and she turned the pages until she found the one she half remembered. There, in Ida's careful hand, a drawing of just such a blackening, just such a spider of gray under the skin, and above it, 3 words, the silver sickness. Below that, more, in writing so small and so tight that Mira had to tilt it to the firelight. Silver is poison to the wolf kind, as it is poison to no other living thing. A blade does not kill them. A bolt does not kill them. Silver in the blood kills them slow, and there's only one way to draw it, and it must be drawn before it reaches the heart, or no skill on earth will matter. Mira read it twice, then she laughed, short and tired, and pressed the back of her wrist to her eyes. Wolf kind, she said to the empty room. Of course. Grandmother, you sweet, mad old woman. Because that was what Ida had been in the end, full of stories. Wolves that walked as men, courts under the mountain, a king with eyes like a forge. Mira had loved the stories and never believed a single one of them, the way you love a song without thinking the words are true. She looked at the man on her hearth, at the blackening that was spreading even as she watched, climbing toward his heart like frost up a window. You are not a wolf, she told him. You are a man who has been shot with a silver bolt by someone who wanted you very dead, and I am going to keep you alive because I am a fool, and then you are going to tell me what kind of trouble you have brought into my house. She did not expect an answer. She did not get one. But she opened the book to the page that told how to draw the silver, and she set water to boil, and she began. Chapter 2. It took her the whole of the night and most of the next day. The method was an ugly one, and her grandmother's notes were honest about that. You could not simply pull poison blood the way you bled a fever. You had to open the wound again, wider, and pack it with a paste of 2 things, moonwort, which Mira had dried and hanging from her rafters by luck and habit, and silverbane root, which she did not have, and which sent her back out into the dying storm with a spade and a prayer to dig at the foot of the white birches where it grew, while a near-dead stranger lay alone by her fire. She found 3 roots. She came back with frozen fingers and a torn cloak, and the roots clutched to her chest like treasure, and she ground them and mixed them and packed the wound, and the man, deep in his fever, made a sound she had never heard a human throat make, a low, broken note that was almost a howl. The hair stood up on her arms. She kept working. By dawn, the blackening had stopped climbing. By midday, it had begun, very slightly, to pull back. By dusk of the second day, his breathing had eased from that far-off drum into something nearer and steadier, and his skin had warmed under her hand from the gray of meltwater to the color of a living thing, and Mira allowed herself, for the first time in 2 days, to sleep. She slept in the chair by the fire with the book open on her knees, and she dreamed of nothing, and she woke because someone was watching her. He was awake. He had not moved. Not really. He was too weak for that. But his eyes were open, and they were fixed on her. And Mira understood at once what her grandmother had meant by a forge. They were a deep gold, gold all the way through, with no soft brown in them anywhere. And they did not look at her the way a sick man looks at the woman who has saved him. They looked at her the way a wolf looks at you across a clearing, when it is deciding what you are. Mira did not move either. She had nursed enough frightened, cornered, half-feral people, hurt soldiers and hunted men, and once a woman fleeing a husband, to know that the worst thing you can do is lunge at them with comfort. So she sat where she was, and she let him look. And when she finally spoke, she kept her voice as flat and easy as if she were talking to one of the goats. "You're in my house," she said. "You're not a prisoner. The door isn't barred against you, it's barred against the cold. You took a bolt under your ribs, and the wound was poisoned, and I've spent 2 days drawing it out. And if I'd wanted you dead, I'd have just left you in the snow, which would have been a great deal less work. There's water by your left hand. Drink it slowly, or you'll bring it back up." The gold eyes flicked to the cup, back to her. He did not reach for it. "Where am I?" he said. His voice was a wreck, all gravel and ash, but underneath the ruin of it there was something a person did not learn, a way of speaking that expected to be obeyed. "The Greywood, the high edge of it, near Stonebrook. 2 days' walk above Hollowmere, if the passes are open, which they are not." She tilted her head. "And before you ask, I have no idea who you are. You came to me without a name. Someone stripped you of every mark you might have carried, which tells me a great deal about the someone, and nothing at all about you." Something moved behind his eyes at that. Not fear, calculation. She watched him decide, in the space of one breath, that she was either very dangerous or very harmless, and she watched him fail to land on which. "My name is Cor," he said. It was a lie. She knew it the way she knew the silver sickness now that she had seen it, the small, flat hitch in a man's voice when he reaches for a name that is not his. But she only nodded, because a lie a man tells about his name is usually a man protecting someone, and as often as not, it is protecting you. "All right, Cor," she said, and got up to fetch the broth. "I'm Mira. You're going to be weak for a long while, and you're going to hate every hour of it, and you're going to want to be on your feet before your body will hold you. Don't. The poison is mostly out, but mostly is not all. And if you tear that wound, I will not be digging Silverbane out of frozen ground again for a man who can't follow a simple instruction." For just a moment, something crossed his ruined face that she had not expected at all. Not gratitude. He was a long way from gratitude. But a kind of startled wariness, as if no one in a very long time had spoken to him as though he were simply a difficult patient and not a thing to be feared or flattered. "You should be afraid of me," he said. Mira set the broth down beside him and met those forge gold eyes without blinking. "Probably," she agreed. "Eat your soup." Chapter 3. He healed too fast. Mira had warned him he would be weak for weeks, and she had believed it when she said it, because that was the truth for any man who had nearly frozen and nearly bled out and been poisoned besides. But by the 4th day, Cor was sitting up. By the 6th, he was on his feet and crossing the room, slow and grim and holding the wall, but crossing it, when by every law of the body she knew he should still have been flat on his back. And the wound. She changed the dressing twice a day, and twice a day the hole in his side was smaller than it had been, the torn edges knitting at a speed that made the hair lift on her arms all over again. A man did not heal like that. A man did not run a fever that broke and returned and broke again in waves, did not turn his face toward the door an hour before she ever heard a sound outside it, did not go so utterly still and listening when a wolf called far up the mountain in the night. She said nothing. She watched. Mira had always been a great watcher of things. On the 8th night, she was changing the dressing by firelight, her fingers careful at the wound, and Cor was looking down at her hands the way he had taken to doing, with an expression she could not read, and she decided she was tired of pretending not to know what she knew. "My grandmother had a name for this," she said quietly, not looking up. "What's in your blood?" She called it the silver sickness. She wrote that it's poison to only one kind of living thing on the earth. She pressed the clean linen down, tied it off, and finally raised her eyes to his. "I am not a frightened woman, Cor. I have lived alone at the edge of this forest for 2 years, and I am not frightened of much that walks in it. So I will ask you once, plainly, and you can lie to me again if you must. What are you?" The fire snapped. Outside, the wind worked at the shutters. For a long moment, she thought he would say nothing, and she had half decided to let it lie, when he turned his hand over on his knee, slow, and she saw the change come into it. Not all the way. He had not the strength for all the way, and she would understand later what it cost him to show her even this. But for the space of 3 heartbeats, his hand was not a hand. The fingers thickened. Dark hair rose along the back of it. The nails went to something nearer claws, and a heat came off his skin like a banked fire, and the gold of his eyes lit from within as if a coal had been blown on. Then it was gone, and he was a hurt man on her hearth again, watching her, waiting to see her run. Mira did not run. Her heart was going like a hare's. She would not pretend otherwise. But she had spent her whole life being told that the woods were full of things that were only stories, and now one of those things was sitting wounded in her house, drinking her broth, and the largest feeling in her, larger than the fear, was a kind of fierce, unreasonable wonder. "Wolf-kind," she breathed. She was telling the truth. All of it. "Your grandmother." His voice had gone strange. "Who was your grandmother?" "Ida Aldwin, a healer. She raised me out here, after my mother died." Mira frowned at the change in him. Why? But he had closed up again, the way he did, and only said, "It does not matter. You should still be afraid." "You keep saying that." She sat back on her heels. "And yet, here is everything I have actually seen of you, Wolf. You have not raised your voice to me. You eat what I give you and thank me for it, which is more than half the men in Hollowmere manage. When the fever takes you, you say a woman's name, Senna, the way a man says a name he is sorry for. And when I cut my hand on the shears 2 nights ago and swore, you came up off that pallet you could barely rise from to see if I was hurt, before you remembered you could not walk." She tilted her head. "Those are not the manners of a monster. Whoever told you that you were one was lying to you, and I think they were the same someone who put silver in your side." He looked at her then as though she had struck him, as though kindness, plainly spoken, were a weapon he had no guard against. "You do not know what I am," he said low. "No," Mira agreed, "but I know what you do. And in my experience, that is the truer measure of a person." She got to her feet and gathered the soiled linen. "Sleep. Whatever is hunting you isn't getting through that door tonight, and I have heard you listening for it every night since you woke. Let me listen for one. It's my house. I'm good at it." She had thought he was asleep when she finally lay down herself, but as the fire burned low, she heard him say, into the dark, in that wrecked and quiet voice, "Thank you, Mira." It was the first time he had said her name. She lay very still and felt it land somewhere under her own ribs, in a place she had thought the cold had closed up for good 2 winters ago, and she thought, with the particular clarity that comes at the end of a long day, "Oh, this is going to be a problem." She had pulled a dying stranger from the snow. Now she was lying awake, glad past all sense that he was still breathing. That was a different danger than silver, and she had no grandmother's book to tell her how to draw it out. Chapter 4. The truth came out on the 11th day, and it came out because of the bolt. Mira had kept it. The bolt's head, that is. When she had opened the wound that first night to pack it, she had found the broken-off tip of it still buried in him, a finger length of metal, and she had drawn it out with her grandmother's long pincers and dropped it, ringing, into a clay dish. And there it had sat on the shelf ever since, while she was busy keeping its owner alive. Now Cor was strong enough to be restless, and being restless, he was prowling her one room like the thing he was, and he stopped at the shelf and went very, very still. "Where did you get this?" he said. "Out of you." She looked up from her mending. "Why?" He picked it up. It was silver, dull and ugly, and shaped wrong somehow, barbed in a way that meant it was made to do harm going in and worse coming out. And along the base of the head, where the shaft had snapped away, there was a mark. A tiny stamped sigil, the kind a noble house puts on a thing to say, "This is ours, and we are not ashamed of it." Mira had noticed it and thought nothing of it. To Cor, it was clearly the whole world. His hand closed around the bolt so hard she thought it would cut him. "Hadrian," he said, and the name came out of him like something torn. "Who is Hadrian?" He turned, and for the first time since she had pulled him from the snow, the guarded, watchful stillness was gone, and what was under it was so raw that she set her mending down. "My uncle," he said. "My father's brother. The man who raised me after my father died of what the court called a wasting sickness." His mouth twisted on the words. "The man who has ruled the Greywood as regent in all but name since I was a boy, because I was always, somehow, too young, and then too untried, and then it was always a poor season to hold a coronation, and there was always one more reason that the crown should wait." He held up the bolt. "This is his Fletcher's mark. His huntsmen carry these. No one else in the north is permitted them." Mira's mouth had gone dry. "You're saying your own uncle shot you?" "I am saying," Cor said, very quietly, "that 3 weeks ago I told my uncle that I was done waiting, that I would be crowned at the spring moon, in my own right, a king and not a ward, that I would name my own council and look, myself, into how my father died." He set the bolt down with terrible care. 4 days later, I rode out to settle a border dispute he assured me was real. His own huntsmen were waiting in the pass. They put 3 bolts in me before I knew them for what they were, and silver does to my kind what you have seen it do. And I went off the mountain into the snow, and I should have died there, and the story he is telling the pack even now is that border raiders killed their king, and he, grieving, has taken up the regency to keep them safe. The fire was the only sound. Mira found that her hands had folded themselves tight in her lap. "You're not Cor," she said softly. "No." "You're the king, the wolf king, the one in my grandmother's stories." She almost laughed at herself, at all of it. "You're the most hunted man in the north, and you've been drinking my goat milk broth for 11 days and complaining that it needs salt." "It does need salt," he said, and it surprised a sound out of both of them, half a laugh, the first thing like ease that had ever passed between them, and then it died, because the thing he had to say next was worse than all of it. "Mira." He came and crouched in front of her, slow and careful of the wound, so that his eyes were level with hers. Up close, the gold of them was unbearable. "My name is Varric. And your grandmother?" "Ida Aldwin, the healer. I know that name. My father knew that name. She was the healer to the wolf court when I was small. She tended my father, and then one night, while I was still a boy, she vanished, and the court was told she had died, and no healer of the old kind was ever allowed near the court again. My uncle saw to that. He purged them all. He searched her face. She did not die, did she? She ran. With you. Mira sat very still while the floor of her whole life tilted under her. Her grandmother's stories, the wolves that walked as men, the court under the mountain, the king with eyes like a forge. Ida, who had never once told Mira how they came to be alone in a cottage at the edge of a forest, 2 days above a village that was not theirs, far from anywhere. Why an old woman with the skill to be physician to lords had chosen instead to dig her own silverbane and trade cheese for cloth. Ida, who had taught Mira the silver sickness and how to draw it as though it were a thing Mira might one day need. When Mira had laughed and said, "Grandmother, when will I ever heal a wolf?" She knew, Mira whispered. She knew what Hadrian was. That's why she ran. She didn't run from death. She ran from him. She lifted her eyes to Varric. My grandmother saw your father die, and she knew it wasn't a wasting sickness. Tell me, Varric said. Tell me everything she ever told you. Mira, please. And there it was, the thing that turned a hunted king bleeding in the snow into the beginning of his uncle's undoing. Because somewhere in the cedar chest under the window was a book of an old woman's careful handwriting, and Mira had a sudden, cold, certain feeling that not all of what Ida had written down was remedies. She had pulled a dying stranger from the snow. She had not known she was pulling out a king. And now she understood, with the fire snapping and the wind at the shutters and Varric's forge gold eyes fixed on hers, that she had not been chosen for this by chance at all. Her grandmother had spent the last years of her life making certain that, if the day ever came, the one person left in the world who could both save the king and damn the man who killed him would be a healer at the edge of the Greywood, with Silverbane in her rafters and the truth in a book. Chapter 5. The book had more than remedies in it. Mira had simply never read it all the way through, because the back pages were the hardest. They were the ones Ida had written last, in a shakier hand, in the long evenings of her final winter, and Mira had always closed the book before she reached them, because grief is a coward, and Mira was no braver than anyone. She read them now, by firelight, with Varric beside her so close she could feel the heat that came off his skin like a banked hearth. And what Ida had written there was not a remedy. It was a confession, and an account, and a warning, all in one. I, Ida Aldwin, healer to the court of the old king, write this so that the truth does not die with me. The king did not waste. I tended him, and I know a wasting when I see one, and this was not it. There was silver in him. A little, given over a long time, in his cup and in his medicines, so slow that no one watched for it, and the sickness it made looked like age and grief. I drew what I could, and I told no one but the king's shield, the warrior Senna, whom I trusted, and the next morning I was told my services were no longer required, and the Lord Hadrian looked at me across the hall in a way that told me I would not live the week. So I took the child and I ran. If you are reading this, and the old king's son still lives, then there is yet time. Silver is the proof. Hadrian's own hand is the proof. And the law of the pack is older than any king. A wolf who poisons his own blood with silver is forsworn, and the pack will not follow a forsworn lord, not if the truth is set before them where every one of them can scent it. Mira closed the book. Neither of them spoke for a long while. The fire ticked. Somewhere out in the dark a wolf called, and Varric's head turned a fraction toward the sound, the way it always did, and then turned back to her. She named Senna, he said at last, rough. My shield. The one whose name I said in the fever. A muscle worked in his jaw. Senna is the only one I would have trusted with my back. If she lives, and if she believes I live, she will not have stopped looking for me, not for a day. Then we get word to her. We. He looked at her, and the look was complicated. Mira, do you understand what you are holding in that book? Do you understand what you have already done by drawing silver from a king? There is a man with the whole of the north in his fist, and you are the one person alive who can take it from him. And the moment he learns you exist, he will send everything he has to make certain you do not stay alive. I have brought my death into your house. I will not let it be yours. And Mira, who had been told a great many times in her life by a great many well-meaning people what she would and would not be allowed to do, felt something flare up in her chest, bright and hot. Let me, she repeated. You will not let me. She stood. Varric, I dragged you in out of the snow with my own back. I dug Silverbane out of frozen ground with my own hands while you were dying on my floor. I opened your side and took my grandmother's poison out of you, and I sat up 3 nights running watching you breathe. My grandmother spent the last years of her life building the very thing you are standing in, so that this house and this book and I would be here when you came. I am already in it. I have been in it since before I was born. The only question is whether you face it alone, which you will lose, or whether you let the one person who has never once flinched from you stand at your side. He stared at her. The Wolf King, who had not flinched from her, stared as if she were the only flinch he could not master. You should be afraid, he said, but there was nothing left in it. It had become a thing, he said, the way a man touches an old wound to be sure it still hurts. I told you, Mira said, gentler now, stepping in close enough that she had to tilt her head back to hold his eyes. Probably, and I'm not. She did not know, afterward, which of them moved first. She thought it was both. His hand came up and cradled the side of her face as carefully as if she were the one who might break, and her hands fisted in the front of his shirt, and the kiss, when it came, was nothing like she had braced for. It was not the kiss of a feared king, or a monster, or a man twice her weight. It was slow, and it was searching, and it shook, faintly, the way the hand had shaken the first time he'd showed her what he was. As if he expected, even now, to be refused. As if no one had ever simply chosen him before, the whole of him, the wolf and the wound and the lonely hunted heart of him, and chosen him gladly. Mira chose him gladly. When they finally drew apart, she was breathless, and so, to her great satisfaction, was he. And the gold of his eyes was lit from within, the way it had been when he showed her his changing hand. But there was no danger in it now, only a kind of stunned, careful warmth. That, Varric said unsteadily, was a great deal more dangerous than the silver. Mira laughed, with her forehead resting against his chest, with his arms coming around her slow, as if he could not quite believe he was allowed. With the fire warm and the storm shut out, and a king's heartbeat strong and sure under her cheek where, 2 weeks ago, she had barely been able to find it at all. Good, she said. Then we're even. Now sit down before you tear your stitches, my lord, and help me work out how to send word to a wolf I have never met, in a court that thinks you're dead, without telling the man who wants us both that way exactly where to find us. Chapter 6. For 4 days they were happy, and the happiness made what came after hurt all the worse, the way warmth always makes you feel the cold more. They made a plan. It was a simple one, because simple plans are the ones that live. Mira knew a wool trader in Hollowmere, a careful woman named Brisa, who had owed Ida a kindness for years and never forgotten it. And Brisa's brother drove a cart down to the lowland markets where, if the old loyalties Ida wrote of were not all dead, word of a particular kind might find its way to the right ears. Varric taught Mira a sign. Not a word, a sign. a way of marking a token that any wolf of the old court would know, and no one of Hadrian's would. And Mira carved it into a flat disc of birchwood with her grandmother's smallest knife, and she would carry it down to Brisa herself on the next clear day and set the long, slow machinery of it turning. And in those 4 days, Varric was not the wolf king, and Mira was not the hunted healer. He learned her routines and made himself useful in the awkward, earnest way of a powerful man who has never once been asked to do anything small. He mended the back fence the goats had broken, the fence that had started all of it, and he did it badly. And Mira teased him without mercy, and he took it with a grin she had not known his hard face could make. He told her about the Greywood as it had been when his father lived, the hall under the mountain, the great hunts, the festival at the spring moon, and she told him about Ida and about the quiet, good life of a healer at the forest edge. And twice more they kissed by the fire, and once they did not stop at kissing, and the open-door warmth of that night was the kind of thing Mira would keep folded away in her chest for the rest of her life, a fire to warm her hands at when she was old. She should have known it was too much peace. It was the wolf that warned them, not Varric. A real wolf, a gray one, that came to the edge of the clearing at dusk on the 4th day and stood and stared at the cottage and would not come closer and would not leave. And Varric went still in the way Mira had learned to dread and said, "Scout, not mine. They've found the trail." "How?" Mira breathed. "The storm covered everything." "Blood does not wash out for our kind the way it does for yours." He was already moving, fast and grim, gathering the few things they had, and the ease of 4 days was gone from him as if it had never been. They will have been working outward from the pass in a circle. A wolf can follow old blood under snow. Mine led here. I should have known. I did know. He rounded on her, and his face had closed up the way it had been that first morning, hard and shut and far away. "You have to go. Now. Take the book, take the token, go down to Hollowmere tonight, to your trader, and you do not come back. Do you understand me? You do not come back to this house." "Varric. They will be here by morning. Hadrian's huntmaster is a creature named Brenor, and he is very good at what he does, and what he does is kill. When they come, they must find one man, alone, who they think is a wandering beggar they've cornered, and they must find no sign that anyone else has ever set foot in this place." His voice was flat and cold, and Mira had heard exactly that flatness twice before, both times when a person was lying to themselves as hard as they could. "You were a kindness I had no right to. I'm a dead man, Mira. I have been since the pass. You will not die for a dead man. Go." And here is the thing about Mira Aldwyn. She was not stupid, and she did not flinch, and she had spent 2 years learning the difference between a man who did not want her and a man trying with all his ruined heart to save her by making her hate him. So she crossed the room, and she took his cold, shut face in both her hands, and she said, "You're a terrible liar. You always were. You hitch on the lie, right here." And she touched his jaw. "The same way you hitched the night you told me your name was Cor. You don't want me gone. You want me alive. And you've decided the only way to manage that is to throw me out into the snow you'd never let me leave anyone in. Well, I'm a healer, my love. I don't abandon people to die so I can feel noble about it. Neither do you. That's the whole reason we found each other." Something cracked behind his eyes. She saw it go. "I cannot watch them put silver in you," he said, and it came out of him broken. "I have buried everyone, Mira. My father, my court. I have buried my whole life. I cannot bury you too. I would not survive it. There would be nothing left in me but the wolf, and the wolf, alone, with nothing left to lose, is the monster you keep insisting I am not." "Then don't bury me," Mira said. "Let's win instead." And she laid it out for him, fast and clear, the way she had laid out everything since the night she pulled him from the snow. She would not run and hide. She would go down to Hollowmere tonight, yes, but not to disappear. She would go to send the token by the fastest hand Brisa had, and she would go to send a second word, a word she could not have spoken aloud 4 days ago, because 4 days ago she had not believed any of it was real. She would send Senna's name. She would send it down every loyal channel her grandmother's book and Varric's knowledge could open, like a stone thrown into still water. And she would tell them that the Wolf King lived, and where, and that he had the proof of Hadrian's silver in his own hands. "You want to fight Brenner with one wounded wolf and a healer," she said. "I want to fight him with the whole truth and every loyal wolf in the north converging on this clearing at once. Your uncle's power is a lie, Varric. My grandmother wrote it down. A forsworn king who used silver. The only thing keeping Hadrian on top is that no one can prove it, and no one knows you're alive. So let's prove it. Let's tell them. Let's make him come to us in front of everyone and have nothing to find but the truth." She squeezed his face, fierce. "You are not a dead man. You are a king who has, for the first time since the pass, got something his uncle does not. You've got a witness and a healer and a book full of his crimes and a woman who will not run." For a long moment, the only sound was the gray scout wolf, somewhere out in the dark, calling once and going quiet. Then Varric bowed his head and pressed his brow to hers and said, in the voice he used for nothing else, the voice she had decided on the 8th night was the truest thing about him, "I am sorry for trying to send you away. You deserve better than to be lied to by a man who, and he could not finish it and did not need to." "I know," Mira said softly. "Now help me hitch the cart. We've got a long walk to Hollowmere and a war to start." Chapter 7. They came at dawn, as Varric had said they would. Mira was not gone. That had been the only part of his plan she had refused outright. She had sent the token and Senna's name down the mountain in the night by Brisa's fastest rider, 3 days too late to be safe and exactly in time to matter. And then she had come back up to the cottage before first light, because whatever happened in that clearing was going to happen to both of them, or to neither. And a healer does not leave her patient, and a woman does not leave the man she has decided to keep. So when Brenor came out of the tree line with 11 hunters at his back, silver-tipped and grim, he found 2 figures standing in the snow before the little stone cottage. A great, dark man who should have been dead, on his feet, with the cold gold light burning in his eyes. And beside him a slight woman in an old wool cloak, with a clay dish in her hands, and a book under her arm and her chin up. Brenner stopped. Mira watched it cross his weathered face, the calculation, the disbelief, the dawning fear. He had been told to confirm a kill. He had not been told the dead man would be standing. "My king," Brenner said carefully, and Mira heard the lie in it, the same hitch. These men all had it. "We feared the worst. The regent has searched a fortnight. Come, let us bring you home to your uncle, who grieves you." "My uncle," Varric said, "put 3 of your bolts in my side, Brenner, with silver. In the pass at Greythorn, 4 days after I told him I would be crowned. Don't insult the woman beside me by pretending otherwise. She drew the silver out with her own hands. She has the head of one of your bolts in that dish, with Hadrian's Fletcher's mark plain on it. So let us not waste the morning." Brenner's face hardened into what it truly was. He had stopped pretending. That was good, Mira thought, her heart slamming. A man who has stopped pretending has decided to do the thing, and she needed him to do the thing, in the open, in front of witnesses, because she could feel them now, at the edges of the clearing, the way Varric had taught her to feel for the things she could not see. The trees were full of wolves, 2 kinds of wolves, and not all of them were Brennors. "The regent thought you might still be breathing," Brenner said, and drew his blade, and it caught the dawn with a dull, ugly shine she had learned to hate. He sent his regards. And then a great many things happened very fast. The huntmaster lunged, not at Varric, but at Mira, because Brenner was good at what he did, and what he did was understand at once that the woman with the dish and the book was the more dangerous of the 2. Varric moved to put himself between them, faster than a hurt man should, but the silver still in his blood made him slower than the king he had been. Half a step slow, and Mira saw in that half a step that he would not reach her in time. So Mira did not wait to be reached. She had not come empty-handed, and she had not come a fool. The clay dish in her hands held the silver bolt head, yes, the proof, but it also held, packed around it, the gray powder of every grain of poisoned silver she had drawn from Varric's body over 11 days, ground fine, kept against exactly the chance that she might one day need to give a wolf a reason to stop. As Brenner closed on her, she flung the whole of it up into his face, dish and bolt and bitter silver dust, and the silver dust did to Brenner's eyes and his open, snarling mouth what silver does to the wolf kind, and the huntmaster screamed and reeled back, clawing at his face, his blade going wide into the snow, and in the half a step he lost, Varric was there. But Varric did not kill him. That was the thing Mira would remember. With the whole of his rage and his betrayal and 12 years of waiting in his hands, the Wolf King did not tear his uncle's huntmaster apart in the snow. He took the man down, and he held him down, and he turned his burning gold eyes up to the tree line, and he roared a single word, and the word was a name, and the name was Senna. And the trees answered. They came out of the gray dawn from every side, the loyal wolves, the ones who had never believed there had been a body, the ones Mira's word and her grandmother's token had reached in the night, and turned toward this clearing like iron toward a lodestone. And at their head was a tall, scarred, silver-furred warrior of a woman, with eyes the gold of her king's, who took one look at Varric alive in the snow and made a sound that was grief and joy and fury all at once. The sound of a shield who had searched a fortnight and never once stopped. Brenner's 11 hunters looked at Senna's wolves, who outnumbered them 3-1, and at the king they had been sent to confirm, dead standing very much alive, and at the huntmaster blinded and pinned in the snow, and they did the only sensible thing 11 outnumbered men can do. They stopped. And into that frozen, breathing stillness, Mira stepped forward, and she did the thing she had come up the mountain to do. She opened the book. "My grandmother was Ida Aldwin," she said, and her voice carried clear across the silent clearing, to Brenner's men and Senna's both, to every wolf who had come, because she had learned long ago that a clear, plain voice is the loudest thing in the world. She was healer to the old king, the one you were told wasted away. She did not waste. There was silver given to him, slow, for years, in his cup and his medicine, until it looked like age. My grandmother drew what she could, and she told one person she trusted, the king's shield, Senna, and the next morning she was dismissed, and she fled for her life with me in her arms, because she had seen the truth, and the truth had a name. She held the open book up so they could see the careful, honest hand. It is all here, written by the one healer Hadrian could not silence, because she ran too far and too fast and too long ago. He poisoned the father with silver and made it look like time. He poisoned the son with silver and made it look like raiders. And the law of the pack, the law that is older than any crown, says a wolf who poisons his own blood with silver is forsworn, and you do not follow a forsworn lord. She let that land. She watched it travel through the wolves of both sides like a wind through grass. And then she said the thing that turned it. You don't have to take my word. You don't have to take the book's word. He has worn silver gloves to handle his bolts for 12 years so the poison wouldn't touch his own skin. It's in the leather. It's in everything he's touched. She looked at Senna, at the loyal wolves, at Brenner's wavering 11. You can smell a lie. My grandmother wrote that too. So when your regent comes, and he will come, because a man like that has to see the body with his own eyes, set the truth before him where every one of you can scent it, and then decide for yourselves who your king is. Chapter 8. Hadrian came at midday. He came because Brenner's men did not return, and because a careful, ambitious man cannot bear an uncertainty, and because, in the end, he had to see for himself. He rode up the mountain to the clearing at Stonebrook with a guard of his own picked men, expecting to find a confirmed corpse and a loose end or two to tie. And he found instead the whole of the North's loyal wolves gathered in the snow, and his huntmaster blinded and bound, and his nephew the king alive and on his feet and waiting for him, with a slight woman at his side holding an open book. Mira watched him understand, in stages, that he had lost. She would not have known him for a villain to look at. That surprised her. He was a handsome, silver-haired man with a kind, tired face. The face of a man who has carried heavy burdens nobly for a long time. And she understood at once how he had ruled a court for 12 years on a lie. He was good at the face. It was the only thing he had ever truly been good at. He tried the face now. He spread his hands, and he spoke of grief and relief and joyful reunions, and he was very good, and not one wolf in that clearing moved, because the silver dust was on Brenner's blade in the snow, with Hadrian's own mark stamped into it, and the book was open, and Senna had read the back pages aloud to them all while they waited, and they could smell, every one of them, the old, cold metal worked into the leather of the regent's fine gloves. The gloves he wore even now, the gloves Mira had told them to watch for. You're still wearing them, Mira said quietly, into his stream of warm and lying words. Even now, even here. You can't help it, can you? 12 years of handling silver and never once letting it touch your skin. A man who fears a thing that much knows exactly what it does. Hadrian looked at her then, truly looked, for the first time. And the kind, tired face slipped, just for an instant, and underneath it Mira saw the thing her grandmother had run from across half a country with a child in her arms, and she did not flinch from that either. And who, Hadrian said softly, are you? Ida Aldwin's granddaughter, Mira said. You should have made sure of her all those years ago. She wrote it all down, and then she taught me to draw silver, so that one day I could pull your nephew out of the snow. She closed the book. You built your whole long reign on the one healer you couldn't catch. I'm what she left you. It was Senna who spoke the law. She stepped forward, the king's shield, and she said the old words, the ones that were older than any crown, that a wolf who poisons his own blood with silver is forsworn, and that the pack would not, could not, follow a forsworn lord. And that by the proof set before them, by bolt and book and the silver worked into his own gloves, Hadrian was named forsworn before them all. Hadrian did the thing that desperate exposed men do. He went for Varric with a hidden silver knife, one last throw, to put down the king and let the chaos sort the rest. But Mira had been right about him from the start, and Varric was no longer half a step slow, because 11 days of a healer's care and a morning of being chosen out loud in front of his whole pack had put the strength back in him, and the king caught his uncle's wrist before the blade was halfway drawn, and held it, and looked at the man who had raised him and poisoned his father and put silver in his side, and did not, even then, tear him apart. No, Varric said. Not by my hand, in rage. By the law. The way my father should have been avenged, if there had been anyone left who knew the truth. He turned to the gathered pack. He is yours to judge. The law is yours. It always was. He only ever made you forget it. The pack judged him, and the judgment of the wolf kind for a forsworn lord who had used silver against his own blood was not death by tooth or blade. It was older and colder than that. He was stripped of his name and his place, and he was given to the mountain in the deep of winter, alone, to the cold he had used as his weapon and his cover for 12 long years, with no kin and no pack and no fire. Mira did not ask what became of him after the wolves led him away into the white. She did not need to. The mountain in winter answers that question the same way for everyone, and she thought of all the people Hadrian had let it answer for, and she found she had no grief to spare him. And then it was over, and the clearing where she had dragged a dying stranger out of the snow 11 days before was full of wolves kneeling in that snow, to their king, alive, who they had thought they had buried. Mira stood a little apart, holding her grandmother's book, suddenly unsure of her place in any of it. She was a healer at the edge of a forest. He was a king with the whole court coming back to life around him. She had known this moment would come, somewhere underneath all the days of broth and teasing and the fire and the 4 good days. The story had its proper shape, and in the proper shape the king goes home to his hall, and the healer goes back to her goats. And that was right, and she would not have wept where anyone could see her. She did not get the chance to go anywhere. Varric crossed the snow to her, in front of all of them, the whole loyal pack of the north, Senna and the wolves and Brisa's rider who had followed the wolves up to see what his word had wrought, and the wolf king, who had been told his whole life that he was a monster, who had tried once to send her out into the snow to keep her alive, got down on one knee in front of the healer who had pulled him out of his grave, and took her free hand in both of his, and pressed his brow to her knuckles, the way she had felt him press his brow to hers, and he said, loud enough for every wolf in the clearing to hear it, and carry it down the mountain, and into the songs they would make of this for 100 years. You should be afraid of me, he said, and you never were, not once. You opened your door, and your book, and your whole heart to the most hunted man in the north, and you started a war with a wool trader, and a token, and your bare nerve, and you saved my life with your hands, and my crown with your truth, and I will not, I cannot, go back down this mountain to any hall without you in it. Marry me, Mira Aldwyn. Be my queen, or be my healer, or be nothing at all but the woman who teases me about a fence I cannot mend. I do not care which, only be it beside me. I have buried everyone I ever loved. I am asking you to be the one I do not have to bury. I am asking you to stay. And Mira, who had spent 2 years alone at the edge of a forest, who had pulled a stranger from the snow because she could not do otherwise, who had stood in the dawn with a clay dish of silver dust and refused to run, looked down at the king kneeling in the snow before her, and she did the only thing she had ever known how to do when something was hurt and breathing and reaching for the edge of the world. She knelt down with him. She always did. It was the whole best thing about her. You're a terrible liar, she said, with her hands on his face and her tears finally come. But you have never once lied about this. Yes, of course yes. Did you really think, after I dug Silverbane out of the frozen ground for you, that I was going to let you walk down this mountain alone? The wolves of the north threw back their heads and howled, all of them, loyal and reunited and overjoyed. And it should have frightened her, all those wolves, all that wild sound. It did not. It sounded like a wedding. It sounded like a home. Here is how it ended, since the competition never tells you, and you have a right to know. They did go down the mountain together, but not at once, because a king with silver still whispering in his blood does not heal on a fortnight, and Mira would not let him travel until she was satisfied, and Varric, who had spent his whole life being obeyed, discovered that he rather liked being told no by exactly one person in all the world. They were married at the spring moon, at the festival he had described to her by the fire, the coronation he should have had years before, except that he was crowned and wed in the same hour, with Senna as his shield standing at his right hand, and Brisa the wool trader weeping happily in the front of the hall, having been given the place of honor she earned with one fast rider in the dark. Senna became the king's first sword and his chief counsel, and the two women, the shield and the healer, who had each in her own way refused to believe the king was lost, became the kind of friends that whole long pieces are built on. Senna told Mira stories of Ida, of the night the old healer had stitched a young warrior's torn shoulder and made her laugh through it, and Mira gave her grandmother that, at last, the knowledge that she had not run for nothing, that the truth she carried across half a country in the dark had come home and set everything right. The old healers were called back to the court, the ones Hadrian had purged who still lived, and Mira saw to it that no king of the Greywood would ever again be without a healer who knew the silver sickness and how to draw it. And she wrote it all into a new book, in her own hand, beside her grandmother's, so that it would never again be a thing the wolf kind had to nearly lose a king to remember. As for Hadrian, the mountain kept him, as the mountain keeps everyone given to it in the deep of winter. He was never seen again, and in time he became a thing parents in the Greywood said to children who told lies. The forsworn lord the cold took, the one even the wolves would not mourn. His name was struck from the rolls. The old king was avenged, and the new king reigned, and the wasting sickness that had never been a wasting sickness was set down in the true record at last, in a healer's careful hand. And on the worst winter nights, when the storms came down off the mountain like something with a grudge, the Wolf King and his queen had a tradition that not even Senna fully understood. They would go out together, the two of them, with lanterns, into the white and the wind, and they would walk the high edge of the wood near the place where a cottage still stood, and they would look for shapes in the snow where no shape should be, for anyone who had fallen, for anyone still breathing, who someone had decided was not worth the trouble of saving. Because that was how it had started, a fool of a healer who could not let one stranger die in peace, and a hunted king who turned out, after all, to be exactly what she had insisted he was the whole time. Not a monster. A man, hurt and lonely, and reaching for the edge of the world, who needed, more than anything, for one person to kneel down in the snow beside him and decide he was worth saving. She had. She always did. And that, in the end, was the whole story. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this story. Tell me honestly, when Varric tried to send her out into the snow to save her, would you have walked out that door? Or would you have stayed and started a war the way Mira did? You can't say both. And tell me the moment you knew she'd never leave him, even before he deserved it. Let me know in the comments. I read every one. If you'd like more stories, there are plenty more on the channel. Much love, Sophie.